Hi everyone, welcome to Go Local Live. I'm news editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us again, perhaps this Wednesday afternoon. We'd like to thank Walter Burbrick with the Naval War College for coming in at 3 p.m. But now we have Becca Hurd Skyping in anticipation of her one-woman show taking place in Cranston this weekend at the Artist Exchange, the other side of 25. Becca, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, excited to talk with you a little bit about this production, again, and your comedy background, because it's an interesting premise of a play that sounds like there could be some humor, but it's a pretty heavy topic. So talk with us a little bit about yourself, your comedy career in writing this production, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, so I'm from Warwick, Rhode Island, born and raised. I went to Vets. And then I went to get my BFA in acting in North Carolina for college. And that's when I started getting into improv comedy and stand-up comedy. And then I moved to Chicago because it's the greatest place to train in comedy. And then I got pretty restless and I wanted to explore writing more. So I applied to grad school in Australia, and lo and behold, I got in, which I did not expect to. So in 2018, I moved to Sydney, Australia to get my MFA in Writing for Performance from the National Institute of Dramatic Art, which is one of the top-ranking performing arts school in Sydney. So like Kate Blanchett went there, and Mel Gibson went there, and Baz Luhrmann went there, a whole bunch of impressive alumni, and me.
And you're going to be bringing your talents here to Rhode Island. But before we come back here to the States, let's talk a little bit about your time in Australia. I mean, is funny across the spectrum when we see British humor, Australian humor? What was it like to be at a school in Australia? Did funny, again, translate across the English language?
For the most part, yes. They consume so much American culture in Australia that I think any jokes that I tried to lay on the table, people were picking up. They understood. And so the play takes place in Boston, and it's a very American story, and there's lots of American references. And I would always check to my Australian peers and be like, do you guys get this? Do you know what's going on? And they're like, yeah, we know.
So talk about the writing and putting on a one-woman production. Other actors and performers have before. It seems like a very enormous undertaking.
Yeah, well, I was so lucky of all the resources NIDA gave me. So I don't think I would have been able to put this up on my own. I definitely wouldn't have been able to, but at NIDA I had access to other students who were designers and directors and producers and dramaturgs. So I assembled a team of my fellow students this past summer, and I approached them with this idea that I had. I hadn't written the show yet, but I knew I wanted to be strategic, and my intentions for going to grad school for writing were quite selfish because I do consider myself an actress first, and I wanted to write for myself. And I thought, okay, the best way that I could market all of my skills would be creating a one-woman show for myself. And I had this premise, and I started talking to fellow students, and it's a very female-centric story, so I wanted a primarily female-identifying creative team, and was able to assemble an amazing team of creatives. And yeah, so I wrote it starting in August 2018, and then workshopped it, developed it over those few months, and then we jumped into rehearsals in January. I had to teach myself how to play guitar for it. I really wanted to include music in the show, but I didn't know how to play guitar. And then we put it up in February, 3 weeks later. So it was a pretty fast shotgun process.
So before we get to the nuts and the bolts of the show, I do have to ask you, is this a show where you can send your friends and family?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I will say it's a PG-13 show, though, so you can send your older friends and family.
As long as they're of driving age, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the show, because, again, you talk about comedy. It's a very interesting premise.
Yeah, so it's about a young woman named Amory who is quite cynical. She's quite narcissistic. She does not want to have kids. She's having some trouble growing up. But her older sister is trying to get pregnant and is having trouble doing so. So reluctantly, Amory agrees to become the surrogate mother for her sister. And things are going pretty well. When she's about 4 months along with she's finally starting to get the pregnancy. She's getting the hang of it. She might even be liking it a little bit, but then something happens in that she has to now take care of this child by herself, which is something she never intended to do. So she ends up stuck pregnant on the other side of 25.
Well, I'll tell you, being on the other side of 25, I am a far, far side of 25. So tell me about your thought process going through this and thinking about what it's like, again, to be in that mindset. I mean, how much did you, obviously when people get into that character, how much could you relate?
Yeah, so I had the premise and the idea of this story just in a note in my phone for a few years. But I'm really happy that I didn't write it before this past year because I just turned 25 and all of the anxieties of that infused their way into the show. And I'm very happy about that. So it is a story about a surrogacy, but it's also a story about a young woman coming of age and growing up in America in 2019 and what that means and all of these societal expectations placed upon her. And though I'm quite different from Amory in a lot of ways, I can totally relate to once you reach 25, it seems like it's this arbitrary age where people just expect that you're supposed to know what you want to do with your life and you're supposed to have all your ducks in a row. And Amory is someone who certainly doesn't, and I feel like I'm someone who doesn't either. So that, I think, was my way into the character and sympathizing with all of the struggles and anxieties of being on the other side of 25 and what that means.
So you must be looking forward to performing at the Artists Exchange in Cranston. So for folks who aren't in theater, what does that mean to come into Rhode Island, into a new place, get yourself situated, get your team acclimated and ready to go for the weekend?
So it's a quite intimate space, which is really great, and it works for the show. It's just me on stage with my guitar and a few balloons. So the audience plays a huge role. I'm not calling on audience members. I'm not going to embarrass audience members, don't worry. But it's a give and take because I have no other actors on stage with me. So the Artist Exchange is great because it's just a 50-seat black box theater. It's just a 50-minute show. So you come in, you sit down, you laugh, and you might also feel some other emotions as well. It's kind of a roller coaster. I got to workshop the show in Australia. We brought it to Sydney, Adelaide, and Melbourne. So we've done the show about 15 times now. My crew is still, my creatives and crew are still in Australia. They couldn't make it, unfortunately, to Rhode Island for this production. So I'm still using all of their work, though. The design and the sound design, the costumes, all of that has translated their way still to Rhode Island. But it's just me putting it up with the help of some friends that I knew from high school theater here in Rhode Island. And I'm really excited to put it in front of an American audience. It's the American premiere, and it's an American show, and it did quite well in Australia. So it'll be interesting to see if Americans laugh at the same points and react to the same parts. And also, I think what'll be interesting is a lot of the people coming to see the show are people who've known me since I was a kid. Whereas in Australia, it was strangers and people who had just met me that year. And I think it's a totally different lens and context that people are going to be seeing this show. So I'm very interested and excited for that.
That was going to be my next question about coming back to Rhode Island again, seeing folks that you know, and being just on the other side of 25. It must be hard to think back to where you were in high school and college and sort of this little full circle as you're just making the stop over here. What does it mean to have now all this experience under your belt and to be bringing that back here into Rhode Island?
It's really special. I'm hoping to bring the show to multiple places around the States, and I'd love to develop it into a film, and I have all these ideas for it, but I think premiering it in Rhode Island was something that meant a lot to me because Rhode Island's my home. It's where I grew up. It's what's made me who I am, and all of that is infused in this show. So it feels like the only way to do it properly is to share the show with those people first.
Okay, well, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in, give us that preview. And if you're watching right now, we'll give you those links to the performance taking place this weekend at the Artists Exchange in Cranston. I'm sorry, coming up on May 30th through the beginning of June. And we'll have that through GoLocalProv.com when you check back later. So we'll have those links for you as well. So Becca, very much appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to meet you in person soon and wish you all the best moving forward.
Yeah, come to the show. I can get you some tickets.
Becca can get you some tickets. Well, Becca Hurd again with The Other Side of 25 at the Artist Exchange. Again, we will put those links to those performances. So I want to thank Becca for Skyping in. I want to thank Walter Burbrick for coming in from the Naval War College. We'll be live tomorrow at the Rhode Island State House with news and politics. But of course, in the meantime, go to GoLocalProv.com and find us on Facebook. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.